Good morning, everybody. It's Nick, aka Cowboy. We have EM Burlingame on with us today. EM is really the Renaissance man. If you don't know who he is yet, you will soon. We're talking about somebody who's done it all: tech startups, Green Beret, investment banking, author. I think you're a sculptor. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, no.
Well, you are a sculptor. You're sculpting people's minds. Let's put it that way. Now, before we get too far into it, first of all, take a look in the description. Algo Factory, our paid sponsor, that's me and V, by the way. I created an algo for you. It's a video. And actually, if you looked at this already, I changed the video. You can use the same link that you had before. I updated the video. So use the same link. Don't feel the need to go and put your name and, give us your name and all that. You could just go look at that same link again, blah, blah, blah. If you haven't done it yet, click on the link, give us your name. Can be a fake name, real name. We don't care. It'll take you to the brand new algo. I created it so that you can see me create the code, and then you can even steal the code if you wish. And then you can connect it to your broker. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this, but I show you the tools that people use to connect to their broker. Now, you'll probably lose because you don't know what you're doing. So don't just do that. Come talk to me about it. In the meantime, take a look in the description. EM's work is in there. We got your Substack, your X account. And for those of you who don't know how to find the description, EM, can you spell out how to find you? Like, give us your website, URL, whatever it might be.
Yeah, emburlingame.com.
Simple.
Real complicated.
Yeah, EM. Well, it's in the thing here. EMBURLINGAME.com. You can find all his stuff on there. EM, how you doing, sir?
Doing all right. A little slow today. I was trying to figure out what's going to happen with India and Pakistan and how that could destabilize the world yesterday. So whole number of conversations around that till last night. And so I'm running a little slow today.
Yeah, well, hopefully you can find out what we need to know on our side. I know they're both nuclear nations.
Yeah.
I mean, there was that spat between India and Pakistan like 2 months ago, and apparently, Pakistan uses the French Rafale, the jet, and then I think Russia's using all their jets, the Sukhois and whatever else they're using. I don't know if they're using MiG still, but long story short, the Russians were able to use some interesting tactics to pretty much outmaneuver all the French planes. And when I say Russians, I mean the Indians using Russian planes. No, is it the other way around? I'd say Pakistan. Who's using which? I've now forgotten, because I would imagine
doesn't really matter. The whole thing got shut down. Point is that that's Greater India, and Greater India has a long-standing relationship with, was the Soviets, but now the Russians. So Russia does have, ISI in Pakistan, and the Pakistanis are more closely aligned with the British, the British occupiers of the English. Bangladesh is just basically floodplains, so it's not really in the picture. India has, now that the Middle East is being taken off the table for the financialists to embed in, with the strikes on Qatar and the changes in Qatar, and there's other things happening with UAE, etc. China's not available to them. They're trying to coup Xi right now. It's not going to work.
Yeah, ain't going to happen. By the way, sorry to interrupt you, V. EM, we got V the Gorilla with us here. How you doing,
EM?
Hey.
I want to go down this path right now. This is a really good path that I didn't expect for us to go on. But before we go down the path of, the chessboard and what they're doing in China, V, can you tell us what happened between the Russian and the European jets in the spat between India and Pakistan. You know the details of that one.
Oh yeah, it's really interesting because the Indians were flying the Dassault Rafale, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the Rafale has some of the best electronic counter warfare systems in Western aircraft to begin with. The newer versions some of them are running ASA radars, so very, very good detection capability. And they were facing off against the Chinese the J-10s, right? The J-10s or the J-11s, the Chengdu J-10s, and then the FL-15 missiles that the J-10s had. And right before the war, the Chinese swapped out the missiles. They gave them the extended range FL-15s, which are superior to the AIM-120 AMRAAMs that we have, that were on the Rafales and stuff. And it was like shooting fish in a barrel. And there was a lot of air victories by Pakistan from that encounter, and a lot of observers who were just standing there marveling these Indian aircraft getting blown out over Indian airspace, before they even get a chance to penetrate Pakistani airspace. So the detection range was like on the Pakistani AWACS were pretty was unexpected, actually. So that was very interesting. So between that was a nice little wake up call to a lot of observers as to what's actually out there with the Chinese. It's also pretty interesting with this whole Xi thing, right? If you remember a couple of years ago, right? I remember the CIA crying about the fact that pretty much every single one of their moles, many of their agents, many of their assets, and informants were rounded up and killed in China. And they were complaining of the fact that they had nobody on the inside of the CCP. It's incredible that if they're even trying to do the same thing again, it's going to be a total and utter failure. But yeah, that's just the little synopsis.
They did the same with businesses and got the the financialists and the British business people out of business leadership there. Yep. They weren't able to get into penetrate Chinese banking. Yep. They were able to get a handle on shadow banking.
Yep.
So, we were setting them up to be taken down just like the Russians, just after the fall of the Soviet Union. We were going to gut them. And people should watch the documentary called China Hustle about how we were, most of the wealth of the China miracle was flowing right back out of China into foreign markets and banks.
Yeah.
So we
didn't George Soros say something along the lines of Xi is Satan himself, or something along that?
Who cares what that old devil himself says?
Well, what matters is if he doesn't like Xi, then I like Xi. Like,
yeah. So Xi did what Xi and the powers who put Xi in positions and have worked with him, because no man is able to do this himself. Same with Russia and Putin decades ago. But that's what they're doing, is they're kicking out the British financialist, British, Dutch, Venetian financialist, and they're pretty much done with that. And now we're trying to coup them by supporting Hu Jintao again and some others. And I don't think it's going to work. Even though people who are supposedly on the know in the intel world that I talk to think it is working. We're going to have Xi's going to get kicked out. It's like, you do realize that Xi getting kicked out would be the worst damn thing to happen to China and the world.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? A huge destabilizing force. And it's an interesting thing that, and Ian, this speaks directly to the Sport of Kings.
Mm-hmm.
And this was why I named the show The Sport of Kings. He did a hell of an article on it yesterday, guys. Go on to X. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put the link in the show here. But so when the Soviet Union fell, my understanding is that Putin eventually, with the power behind him, it wasn't like Putin's a dictator. He's got a lot of people behind him. Russia's not a monolith. All the stupid people don't know anything about what's going on in Russia. Putin's a dictator. Go fuck yourself.
Doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
Get killed. Yeah.
Quickly.
He's an autocratic.
He's an Putin is the dictator. So that's kind of, most guys who say that sound just like that. So first of all, the link is in the chat for that, for the Sport of Kings most recent article. Now, Putin ended up, did he end up did people sort of get disposed of in the interest of Russia at that point?
Yes.
And then in China,
less getting disposed of, they were just sent back to the countries from whence they came, or they were allowed to flee. A whole lot of them went to Israel, by the way, and to Britain, right, to the British Isles. So a lot of them went to London, a lot of them went to Tel Aviv.
Yeah,
sounds very financialist. So
very financialist, yep.
Now in China, a lot of the guys were even probably some allowed to leave, but like we said earlier, disposed of. And can you tell us the history going back to I think it's like the dooms of Alfred?
Yeah.
How were the judges treated? I know I'm kind of not.
Hung them.
Yeah, I know the story, but
yeah.
Can you give us a little history on that and how it, like, why it's important?
Well, give me 1 second. Let's go back to Venice, the Republic of Venice, which had a doge, by the way, but it was an elected, right? So it had a dictator with dictatorial powers, but it was an elected individual. But the Venetians, so hell, we can only go all the way back to the Senate, the original Senate in Rome. There's been this battle between kings and oligarchs. Plato wrote about it, 3,000 years ago or whatever. With respect to if you don't have control of your judiciary, if you don't have control of your military, and if you don't have control of your exchequer, the treasury, you don't have control, and you have to have control of all of them. If you don't have control of any one of them, you're not in power. Primarily the judiciary, because it adjudicates all of the all final arbitration of decisions is made by the judiciary. And if your judiciary is corrupted and working for foreigners, which is what the dooms about with the justices in ancient England, Wessex at the time, England didn't exist yet, were working on their own behalf or on behalf of the Vatican, the Catholic Church. And so Alfred made the judiciary have to conduct all business in English. All laws had to be written in English, and literacy, heavy literacy, was promoted amongst the what would become the English peoples, specifically so that everybody could have access to the law. And then he made the law common to all peoples, prince, king, and people, common people. And then he hung judges, 40 of them, a little over 40 of them. Now, there's some contestation about whether he did that or not, but it seems to hold, right? So what do the Venetians do, right? The Dutch, the city of London, etc. I mean, we're watching it right now. They're trying to do, color revolution in Slovakia. They're trying to do a color revolution in Georgia, right?
Yeah.
So what do? They get in with, world organizations, and they get in with NGOs, and they buy up, or maybe not buy wholly, but they gain the loyalties to foreigners of local citizens in bureaucratic positions, in the judiciary particularly, right? Politicians, too easy. They're just prostitutes anyways. That's the way they've always been treated, or should have been. But that's the common thread. And Russia said no after the fall. People got to realize that somewhere between 3 and 5 million Russians starved to death after the fall of the Soviet Union because of all of this. It had the highest death rates in the world, the highest suicide rates, etc., because of all of this parasitism and this, It was basically the attempt to genocide the Russians by the financialists. And the Russians said no. The Russians had a thing to fall back on that was common, that predated the Soviet era, and that was Russian civilization, Orthodox Church, Russian civilization, organization, structure, all that stuff that the Soviets had tried to wipe out on behalf of the financialists, but weren't able to wipe out. Well, China's the very same. China's civilization is even millennia older, right? 3,000 years older than Russia's. So, and I had this conversation in China when I was doing analysis, when I was an analyst in investment banking. Back in the early 2000s, people were, or mid 2000s, because the Chinese leaders, business leaders mostly, but some government leaders that I was talking with were very concerned about what was happening to China and what was going to happen if this parasitism wasn't gotten under control. And I told them that at some point the Chinese are going to be successful enough to where they're not just chasing wealth creation. There's going to be enough wealth, and then they're going to look back to their culture and their society and civilization and try and restore that. And that will be an organizing force. And that's exactly what's been happening under Xi. Same thing happened to Russia. Same thing starting to happen here in the United States now. Right? We're 20 years behind. We're a decade and a half behind China's move to do this, remove the financialists, and the Chinese were a decade and a half after the Russians, moved to, to remove the financialists from there. Now we got a problem. One last, so kings have stepped forward, kingly peoples who play the sport of kings that controls the great game that all the managerial class is playing. But we have one gaping hole in the world, and that's the greater India region. And they've got the manpower. They've got millions and millions and millions of hundreds of millions of excess young men, as we're seeing all over. They're flooded into every corner of the world. They've been put into the positions of heads of most of our major corporations and some of our banks and et cetera. None of that was done accidentally. And I suspect this Vivek dude, that guy's just rubbed me wrong from the first moment I saw him, before I even knew how he made his money by screwing people over. Oh, right?
He's an op. Just Vivek Ramaswamy, if that's properly said.
Yeah.
He was his entire education was funded by the Soros group. So when you wake up one day and decide he's not going to be a communist, he's very well spoken, very slick, says all the things that are ear candy for the conservatives. I guarantee you that guy's a snake.
Oh, I guarantee you the administration figured out exactly who he was early on, and that's why they kicked him the hell out of, the administration. That guy, but one of the thing that about the Indians and Pakistanis, and like Pakistani ISI, Pakistani intelligence is unbelievably good, and they're basically, everybody talks about CIA and MI6 and the Mossad. People need to also be putting ISI in there, because that's same group, same organization, same capacities, way more ruthless.
Yeah.
What we forget is that India itself is a British construct. When the English went in there, when my ancestors went in there in the 1600s, 1700s, it was a whole bunch of different rajas and principalities and kingdoms and a whole lot of conflict and fighting. And it was the English, British, and really the Scottish, because they were the ones who managed all of that, who shaped it all up into an actual country.
Correct. It was never meant to be a country. The country's way too atomized. Every state in India has its own culture, its own its own language. It's too fragmented.
Yes.
So that's why it's like I look at India and it's like, my God, it's like there's nobody can convince me that's a $4 trillion economy. There's just nobody can convince me of that. It's just it's possible, but it depends on if you're using the wrong numbers. Like we don't have a
4 trillion rupees.
Like, we don't have a $22 trillion economy in the U.S.
Yeah.
80% of that's bullshit.
But I think we're making lots of money when I call in geriatric folks in the United States and I ask for a social security number so we can make sure we are able to deposit money into your account.
Yeah. So India is a problem. The Indian Pakistani peoples, and the part of the problem is that they were a British they're a British construct to begin with for 3 centuries.
They're still a Commonwealth, if I'm not mistaken. They're still in the list.
Yes, yeah, and they were the managerial class for the British Empire because there wasn't enough. We were using our young men. I don't like the term British, but the greater
that's why you
English.
Find Indians everywhere. You find
they're everywhere,
all over the Caribbean. They're
yes.
Trinidad, Guyana, Jamaica. You see Indians everywhere.
Correct.
All over Africa.
We used our young men to fight.
Yep.
And we used their young men to administer.
Yep. And
they're everywhere. And that is a very serious. That is a group and community that the financialist, parasite can live in quite well. And there's hundreds of millions of them. And as we said, they're everywhere. And again, they're the heads of all the major most of the major corporations. They've got quite a number of billionaires. Most of that's probably constructed, like Vivek, right? He was made a billionaire through a fraud, but now he has it. A clever market manipulation fraud, but it's how a lot of billionaires are made, quite frankly, right? So I'm looking at that and, okay, so we've got most of the Northern Hemisphere locked down. Europe's bankrupting itself. Europe's not going to be a threat. The Sport of Kings post I made yesterday was specifically about Europe, right? It's like, okay, let's go ahead and tell them we got their back and we're going to go to war. And let's do loyalty tests and see who's really all in on war and how stupid they are and who really, not just the obvious ones, but, the ones behind the scenes. And let's pull them out and parse them out and, get them to identify themselves, like this ludicrous, whatever Finnish, I think, lady who went to Georgia or wherever and is out in front of the government saying, basically you need to be cooed. So you call all these nut jobs out, right?
Yeah.
But, so again, for all intents and purposes, I still got issues with Canada, but I think we'll get that sorted. Vast numbers of Indians and Pakistanis in Canada and in the British Isles and across all the Commonwealth. So, that is a threat vector that I hadn't really been looking at. Now, somebody approached me about these things about 2 months ago out of the blue, unexpectedly, and I didn't quite see it. But now I'm like, and so what do they do, right? They're not known for their war fighting. Pakistanis will fight, right? But the Indians aren't so much known for their fighting. So what you do, you use them to, infiltrate all your companies. They're great administrators. They're good math. They're good at math, and so they make good administrators. And so you get them in your banks and your institutions, into your governments. You get them into your bureaucracies, and they're loyal to this financialist system regime.
Absolutely, bro.
And then but you can't use them for armies because they're just not very good at fighting. I mean, the Pakistanis are.
What are you talking about? We are amazing.
Yeah, no. So what do? You use your Arab terrorists. You use your folks that you're running out of Qatar and that, or you can run them out of Pakistan. But you use it with the ISI and the Jet and the JAL and all these others. And so then you still use the Islamic terrorist guys, but that's your paramilitary irregular forces. And now you still got now the financialists are still in control. So, I don't know how this one gets fixed, right? The only way to fix it would be to get a king-like figure in India, but India is a construct.
It is a construct, and I've had this conversation so many times. I'm a bit of an Indian background to myself.
on
one side of the family. But it's interesting when I look at India because it never was designed to be a country. It's not. It's too atomized, right?
Yeah.
If you get India in a war, the guy from Punjab is not going to fight with the guy from Gujarat because they're going to be thinking about, I'm going to look for Gujarat's interest, right? Not so much as India's interest. So they don't have any real loyalties there. Okay, and there's like total corruption on every level, and so whatever affinity that the Punjabi, the Gujarati, the guy from Karnataka, the guy from Kerala, the guy from Tamil Nadu, the guy from Mysore, all these guys, they're loyal to their local lands, not so much the country as a whole.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like. And the thing that kept them alive, like you said, it's the British construct that created this amalgam.
Yes,
but it's a loosely knit amalgam. And if it's ever in a situation where there's a great deal of turmoil, I don't see the country holding together. It can literally fragment. It can literally balkanize because everything is there to balkanize. Every state has its own language. Every state has its own culture. Every state has its own history, its own food. I mean, you want to talk about like difference, bro? It's different,
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So I've always seen it as an anomaly, and it's still a crown country. It's still a crown agent.
Yeah. Well, it's the wild card now that's going to have to be dealt with. And how do we deal with that? They're everywhere and they're in everything, right? And they lead. They're not just peasant class. So that's the one massive population in one region that is, I don't know how you can trust it, right? There's no way it's going to have a strong leader, very much for the reasons you said, but it's
India only survived in the past because it had like the Mughals, right? The Mughal Empire. The Mughals ruled India forever, right? And India can only thrive. You got to have a strong man in there. You got to have like somebody like Lee Kuan Yew. I mean, even Lee Kuan Yew said it best. There's no way India could ever even match China in any regard. It's a fake Western construct. The economic numbers coming out of India is completely fake. I don't believe it's a $4 trillion. When you go to Germany, Germany's a $4 trillion economy. You see $4 trillion infrastructure. You see $4 trillion buildings. You see $4 trillion worth of wealth. You go to India, what the hell are you looking at? You looking at the 3 mile high trash heap right outside of Delhi? It's a joke.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like it's wild. Yeah. And so I don't believe the numbers. I believe they're there to a lot of degrees to do what for the longest time the City of London Corporation wanted to do. Right? They'll never step out of line from that. Their loyalties are to that because every single people you have this nationalist upswing with Modi and whatnot, but there's so many Indians that are still like sycophants when it comes to the British Raj, when it comes to the involvement with the crown and all that stuff, So
they're doing everything they can, to try and create some single unified, we are a great people, we have a great history, we have, and I get people come out of nowhere sometimes say, well, that started in India, or this came from India, or
the Indians there's a lot of great inventions that were created in India. It's incredible. But those things occurred not as an atomized society. That occurred when it was being ruled by a singular power.
Yes.
With an iron glove. That's the only other than that.
And then nobody's ever been able to occupy, control all of it.
No, exactly. It's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
It's a country that shouldn't be a country. It just should be a loose union of states,
principalities and states.
Exactly. At best.
States operating
confederation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mutual self-interest.
Yeah.
And I think if the economic windows change or whatnot, it's Indians are for the most part they're docile. They're not fighters. They'll pack up and leave.
Yeah. Well, except the Pakistanis are.
Well, that's because you have
Muslims and they're fighters.
They're fighters. And here's the thing: the difference is this: Indians, you got a majority Hindu, right?
Yep. Yep.
You don't see any real the Christian majority in India is in the south, places like Kerala and adjoining states. And then in the north, it's predominantly Hindu. And what do Hindus eat? It's all veggie. It's all vegetables, man. That's why they're like malnourished. They're Indian guys typically are smaller. They're not like heavy set, big bone guys. You know.
Yeah.
No, they're not fighters, but the same genotype or the same phenotype winds up in Pakistan. They eat meat, and boom.
Yeah. Well, the real, 3 centuries basically of being a British City of London construct, and it was created specifically by the City of London.
100%.
The British East India Company, Indies Company, or India, I think. And now they're spread, so if we're going after this financialist problem and they're in leadership all over the world, this is a serious, they don't need to be fighters. Again, you can use Islamic terrorists and you can use, irregulars, and you can use cartel guys for that.
Yeah.
Right. And you've got the Azovs, which are all over the world, as well as leadership.
Yeah.
And they've been fighting with, ISIS and Al Qaeda and other fighters have been fighting for the Ukrainians in Ukraine for the last 3 years.
Right.
So
yeah, the saying goes, Azovs, Nazis, Azov live and breathe.
Yeah. So I think, I hadn't really been looking at the India vector, the Indian populace, et cetera, until yesterday. And I got into it pretty hard yesterday. It's why my brain's a little tired today. Excuse me. I think we have a bigger parasitic problem than we realize with these financialists. And then getting rid of them is not going to be as easy as we think. And we're probably going to wind up having to do much like China has been doing over the, since 2012, where a whole lot of CEOs and business leaders are brought in and told, you don't work for whoever the financialist, wherever they move to anymore. You either work for us or you're gone. You're out. Right. So Russia had to do the same, replace leadership in most of its businesses and a bunch of bureaucracy. China's been doing the same. That's why we're so upset. That's why we want to coup them, because they're removing all of our human infrastructure, which wasn't just all the CIA spies, et cetera. What people are really upset at is that all of, like Jack Ma and the others were told you can keep most of your wealth. Right. Same thing Putin did and the Russians did with, the oligarchs. You can keep your wealth. You can keep you'll be a recognized, oligarch here. But if you ever get out of line and do anything against China, you will lose your wealth in your life. And there was one Chinese billionaire who fell off a rock wall in France here a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Remember that?
You see, I love when a country deals with its corrupt billionaires. I love it when they deal with their banksters.
Yes, the oligarchs.
It's like I'd like to have somebody have a sit-down meeting with Larry Ellison and be like, listen, man, here's the deal. You're going to sign this document. You're going to behave yourself. You're going to shut the fuck up, or it's going to be your brains on the document.
Or the next time you fly your MiG, whatever he's got, a MiG 22 or MiG whatever, it's going to blow up. Yeah, no, you have to have, this is why they're saying the no kings thing right here in the U.S., the whole no kings thing. Well, it's not so much a king, but it is a strong monarchical-like leader, not absolute monarchies, because they don't tend to work outside of very narrow bands. But without a strong monarchical power, executive power, because that's what the king is the executive. You can't, and a strong oligarch or a strong aristocracy that extends from the middle class up. By the way, it's not a wealth thing. It's relationships, connections, access, right? Commitment too. But if you don't have those, then the oligarchs run out of control, and you have this financialist, a parasitic financialist enslavement system. So I think we're just getting started. So one, It's finishing up in China right now. We're just starting it here in the United States, just beginning. We're probably where the Russians were in '99, right? Maybe 2000.
The question becomes, where's our Xi? Where's our Putin?
Well, we have our Xi now, and Trump. Question is, who's going to replace him? Because I don't know, but I don't believe that there's going to be a move for him to stay in office after, in 2028.
Yeah.
So question becomes,
you don't think Maybelline could do it?
No.
Yeah.
So, Xi will stay in power. Putin will stay in power. We'll figure that. I think that's being figured out here. I think J.D. Vance is probably the right guy. I don't know, honestly, but we've got a big gaping hole in the world, right? And I believe that Trump told His Majesty the King, we got your back. You go ahead and exercise your powers, do what you got to do carefully, but we know who your Praetorian threats are in your security, in your, let me put it this way. The way in which the sport of kings is played, right, is if I have a Praetorian threat that I can't get rid of because in the United Kingdom and here, the security is paid for by the state, right? Like the crown doesn't provide its own security. It hasn't since the 1600s, right? That's how it's been controlled. So what do? Well, you put some open-ended contracts out there so that if the financialists decide that the monarch or any member of their family has an accident or passes away suddenly of something, somebody prominent is going to die. Right?
Right.
Somebody prominent who, on the financialist side is going to die. So I think that's what Trump told the king and His Royal Highness, that we got your back. You're safe, physically safe. You don't have to worry about that threat anymore. Go ahead and do what you have to do here. Acting within your constitution and within the rights and powers that you have and prerogatives, do what you have to do. So that's the Commonwealth, right? Well, that's the crown, the English system, and the United States is going. So they're just starting, and you can see it. Her Royal Highness Kate Middleton came out and said, don't think this digital ID thing's good. And His Royal Highness Prince William went and had an impromptu interview with some guy, I can't remember the guy's name, at a pub, right? That's all moving pieces. We stopped sharing intelligence with the British government because they put an enemy in as the head of the Home Secretary, which is now directly the head of MI5. Basically the equivalent of the FBI, Department of Justice. Like, we're not sharing intel with you. So Russia's locked down, China's locked down, the United States getting locked down. The British Isles are getting locked down. We still got an issue with Ireland. I think we'll work on that, figure that out too. But we got this big gaping, and the Middle East is getting locked down, right? That's really the Saudis, right? MBS is the king there. They're making peace with Persia because Persian influence is predominantly Central Asia, and they've got a good relationship with the Russians because they share that sphere of influence. But we got this big gaping hole over there in that mishmash called India, and they're everywhere.
What do you think see, here's the thing, right? A lot of people are like, oh, India is with the BRICS. I don't trust India in the BRICS. India does its own interests, right? Its own regard in that regard, but at the same time, it runs cover for the Brits. It runs cover for the City of London Corp.
Yes.
In terms of its operational efficacy of its population overseas and this, that, and the other, I don't like. If I don't know, man. I think I don't see these people as any sort of combatants or threats.
Well, that's
and I think what occurs is if you take away the financial incentive, you make it difficult. Like that H-1B thing is a great way of doing it, right?
Yep.
It allows them to pack up, right? You kind of leach them out of the system because, like you said, it's not like the Pakistani. It's not like somebody who has the wherewithal to stand and fight.
But these guys, that's what I said, though.
It's
we got,
real quick with what you're saying,
yeah.
But I do believe in the administrative sabotage
yes,
that occurred.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you look at it, the question is why is Sundar Pichai like the head guy at Google?
Yes.
Right.
Or Sandeep or whatever his name is at Microsoft.
Yeah.
None of this is by accident.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they try to get a guy into the administration with Vivek.
Correct. He was supposed to go with Doge, and then they kicked him out.
So none of this was done by accident. This is while we were, and I admit myself, while I was looking at the Arab vector threat, the Islamic vector threat, I wasn't looking at the Indian, vector threat. And it's not so much India itself as a country, because again, that doesn't really, it's a construct. It's not so much that, it's this 300 years of loyalty by Indian peoples, greater Indian peoples to the British system.
Yeah.
And, the financialist system, which is a passive aggressive occupier system. And so, they are embedded here in ways that we weren't quite looking at. And like, if you go to like the United Kingdom, they're everywhere. And they're flooding hundreds of thousands of them into Ireland right now. Indians, Pakistanis.
Well, who's the president? Who's the prime minister of Ireland?
I don't know.
He's an Indian guy.
Yeah, well, and then we got this guy. So
gay Indian.
Yeah, so we've got this huge problem of these British, brown-skinned British people, and I say that because, they're darker skinned, and because they, for 3 centuries, have been raised in the British system, the financialist system. And they're very good at it. Some of them are very good at it. That's why they rise up to these top positions. But who's doing that? It's the financialists. It's the, why do they get to be the CEO of these major corporations? Because Wall Street, some firms on Wall Street want them to be. So then, okay, who's that? Well, it turns out BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard have a big part in all of that. So that's another invasion threat vector that nobody's paying attention to, because it's up here in the corporate world, in the business world, in the banking and finance world, and government bureaucratic world. But we've got a serious problem. We've got a serious problem where the enemy is within everything. And they have zero loyalties to us and our people, to our ways of life. None.
No.
And, how are we going to deal with that? Right. You're going to have to change out a whole, so I don't know. Right. You have to do the way China did. And that's, well, one, they just didn't allow foreigners to be heads of their country, their major companies. Right. But a lot of these people were born in the United Kingdom, or they were born here.
Yeah.
Right. And so, so it's not a matter of you can just, export them, but it's a matter that you need to, I remember just 20 years ago whenever we were in a major serious business talk, or we were doing, a serious M&A transaction or work, anything in big business, there was always a conversation related to how does this impact national security?
Right.
Okay. Well, how does it impact national security that so many of our top administrative leaders are non-Americans?
Yeah.
I don't care if they were born here, right? But they don't come from our civilization. They don't have the loyalties to us and our peoples and our ways of life. And how did they get into those positions over other people who are probably equally, if not more qualified? They were placed there. How? By Wall Street. Why? Because they stay in control. Even if we fix all this other stuff, the borders and everything else, they're still in control.
Interesting.
So kind of trying to map out the solution. Solution is a scary word to use here, but
just don't put the word final before it.
Right, you don't want I wasn't gonna say it. Yeah, pretty much, right. So, okay, so any of these countries that have purged, let's just say, okay, first of all, let's not go down the path of it's the Jews. Yes, there is a Zionist problem. Okay, so differentiate between the Zionists and the Jews, first of all. And that's, I think, an important facet of a much bigger problem. So if we are able to get rid of all of those groups that are part of this bigger problem, including your City of London sort of, communist, Davos types, your Zionist, all these people who seem to be subverting, our country, our way of life, all the stuff we always talk about on the show.
Really, it's the economy that that we got to worry about. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, it is. I would argue that a big part of, the attack on the economy comes through the social war, though, because if you can stir people up by their divisions, then you're
that's all distraction. The real war is all that's distraction from all the extraction that's happening in the business.
Ooh, I like that. That was good.
What was
all that other stuff is distraction from the extraction that's happening right in front of us at the corporate and banking levels.
So with that, it seems that if they're pitting people against each other, then those same people will not be able to look as to who the real problem is. So you have a few of us who do understand what's happening, Trump included, and especially Trump, and whoever is telling Trump what to do, because I know a lot of people, Trump's a dictator. Shut the fuck up. No. Trump has people who tell him what to do. He didn't get elected all by himself. So ideally, the people who have put Trump in power are able to put other people in power and still have the same goals over the next 10 or 20 years, because I don't know that 3 more years of Trump is going to fix it. I think he's doing the best he can.
This is a 20-year, at least a 20-year process.
That's my number 2. We got 2 decades. And I think that 2 decades is going to be mostly 2 decades of humiliation. And what's probably, and I mean economic humiliation. I'm comparing it to the century of humiliation experienced by China. So, and it may be longer, but the point here is that getting rid of these people, and you always call it, cutting out the cancer. You have to starve the cancer. So the financial game seems to be just the precursor to it. If we were to kind of do say Putin or Xi did, and take a much more aggressive approach, and I'm putting that very delicately, we would probably have some major problems. Now, if we had the right people in charge in this country and the economy were to take a severe downturn, then would be the time to be more aggressive, because there's nothing left to destroy at that point. But we're not there. So it seems to me that and again, I am not a trust the plan guy. I know you think quite the opposite of trust the plan. I think there is a plan. I don't know that it will be executed, but I think it's being executed as well as it can be, in that the people who need to be booted also are being financially starved, and it's being done through a lot of things that we're seeing, and we've gone through a lot of it, shutting the border so the cartels can't make money. You have all this other, type of things going on. Now, all of that to say, we have this news that came out yesterday where the cartels are supposedly, we don't know how true this is, and I know EM and I were on Twitter kind of talking about this, but there are supposed contracts or bounties being put on federal agents' heads, and namely ICE and probably CBP. Do you really think that those bounties exist, EM?
Yes.
And do you think they're put out by the cartels?
It's the intelligence agencies using the cartels so the Department of War is at war with the intelligence community, because the intelligence community is the devil's legions of the Praetorians. It's their muscle, it's their violence, it's their assassinations and character assassinations and reputation assassinations, and it's the violence, the violence necessary for the extraction to continue maximally. And so of course they will put the bounties out on. That's what you do. That's what we do in unconventional warfare. We come in pallets of cash and put fucking bounties on people. I mean, it's just the way it's done. So of course they're doing that. It's a, intimidation tactic. It's real. It's also a threat to, any judge or district attorney that's in their pocket that might think of, ruling against them or working against it. So it's not just about the officers themselves, right? It's about keeping all of the infrastructure in place. Keeping the infrastructure, the judges, the district attorneys, the prosecutors, the, Mayor Bass in LA, who's a straight up CIA asset. I mean, look at her career with NGOs and what she's done and coups and color revolutions, et cetera. She was sent to LA to do a color revolution in frickin' Los Angeles, in Orange County. So, yes, the bounties are real. And yes, that's where the fight's going to start. And then it'll spread out from there.
I mean, this starts to get into a bit of an extrapolation of the broader picture, right? And I think to bring it home, to land the plane, because we're near the end of the show, if the problem is going to start there, I would be concerned about how the LEOs, law enforcement officers, and all of the, let's say, cops, sheriffs, leadership here, it would be good to know how to deal with those who are compromised, or at least how to identify them,
So these things get ugly in the first 6 months to a year. Things get ugly. A whole lot of smaller little actions is, in some communities, you just, unfortunately, the government and the law enforcement is so corrupt. It's the enemies. The enemy owns and controls it. So let's pray that it doesn't go there, but it seems to be going there inevitably. I didn't realize until yesterday how infiltrated we are.
Mm-hmm.
And how deep the City of London extraction mechanism and manpower is. And there is no way that they are going to go without a bloody fight.
Well, you said you realized it yesterday. What was it yesterday that caused that realization?
It was the realization of how many Indians there are and Pakistanis in our own countries, in our own communities, and how much of our economy, the key fundamental components of our economy, they are in control of. They are in positions of power in all of our major corporations, many of our major banks, in governments, and right down to the businesses that normally would allow that would be middle-class businesses here in the United States that would allow, and in the UK and Ireland, that would allow a native-born middle class to be rebuilt, which is what has to happen. But the extractive system, right, at the banking, corporate level, government levels, that extraction system needs a decimated middle class.
Okay. Yeah. So this such parasites. Yes. Parasites kill the host because they need a middle class from which to extract, and yet that kills the middle class.
Correct. They're competing. This extractive system is competing with the middle class for resources, for wealth, for land, for everything. So, I didn't, again, till yesterday when I was really looking at India, Pakistan more as the sport of king side of things of, is there going to be a king-like figure there that can get that, under control so it's not a threat vector for the financialists? And then I realized, holy shit, no, at least not now. And maybe, maybe never, because it's a construct. It's a artificial construct. And then from there, I started to look at how many of their people are in positions of, major positions all across the Commonwealth and all across the English-speaking world. And then I started looking at it, and I started going, who the hell's behind that? It's the markets, the stock markets, and the big investment banks. And who are we at war with? Well, the big investment banks, the big, the stock markets, et cetera. Well, they put those people there on purpose. This didn't just somehow miraculously, all of our top corporations and everything all have Indian leaders. That's not what.
Yeah, there's some talk about that with the H-1B fraud, and V and I have talked about this. First of all, there was a bit of a brain drain from places like India. We got a lot of very talented people at a higher level due to the H-1B visa, so it's not all bad. But it seems in recent years,
over time, there's been a lot of fraud. Go ahead.
Yeah, like any other exploit, the fraudsters latch onto it. You have these mills over in India that create fake credentials to make people look like they're qualified, and then they come over here and and then everybody hire, you got whoever's in charge might be the real deal and have the degree and have the skill set, but then they hire their cousin and their brother and who have fake credentials, and then you end up in where we are now. But I wonder, and I've never thought of this until you just said it, I wonder what percentage of that fraud is also an operation to implant certain people. It doesn't even have to be fraudulent. They could take people who have the degrees and do it, but maybe that's how they're getting foot soldiers in. And I'm not saying we need to be suspicious of Indians.
Well, these aren't foot soldiers. These are economic foot soldiers, right? So there's, give me 1 second. Your native people have to be able to earn and build, earn a living and build wealth in their own lands. And if you're against the native people, you flood the country with other people and then make sure that they get the jobs and they get the company, they get to build the companies and they get the financing and the backing, et cetera, and that they rise up in your, those institutions, those corporations and banks that have control over all of that. And you get them into bureaucracies and governments, judgeships and other things that have oversight of it. And you just subtly, quietly skew the whole economy away from the native peoples.
There it is. So basically, it's diverting economic power away from those who would spend it in ways that would be healthy for this country.
Yes. So what do you wind up with? You still win your financialist war. You've destroyed the native population there. It's warfare. It's just modern kind of warfare. People think they understand 5th generation warfare. They don't understand. They think, oh, well, it's all just digital stuff. No, it's all this non-army, non-kinetic warfare that accomplishes the same thing. It just takes time. It just takes longer.
Well, you got 20 years. And I know we're at the end of the show. This is something we could really continue on. It was a good a good path, a good ant path to take. So I guess we just, at this point, if you were to leave us with just some thoughts on how to keep our eyes open, if you could give us one bit of advice as to, in a healthy way, how to sort of identify and deal with perhaps a problem. Maybe it's, someone you're dealing with or a company, or if you can make it really simple, what would you leave us with? I know that's totally broad. That's such a broad question. Yeah. That's a really broad question, but I don't know. Or forget that question and just
it's
your closing comments.
Closing comments. I'm sorry.
I'll leave people with this thought, right? We are at war for the future of our peoples. Straight up.
And then they clarify, EM, so people don't take this the wrong way. You're not talking about a race. You're talking about a civilization.
I'm talking about the English civilization is at war, and we are losing. And we are losing because we think we can fist fight and gunfight our way out of everything when it gets really bad. But that's not the case, right? Because the enemy isn't fighting us that way. They use that as, here, everybody, this is Mimi's tale.
Hi, Mimi's tale.
Give me a second. our enemies know that we're good at gunfights and fist fights. So they're not fighting us that way. But how they're fighting us is politically, culturally is losing now, but politically, legally, but really how they're fighting us is economically. They are trying to economically replace us in our own lands. This great replacement theory, well, it's true. How does it work? Well, they bias towards all the foreigners to get the jobs and to run our companies and our banks and everything else. And then they just slowly throttle the native populace, and they win. They don't have to, no gunfighting, none of it. It's the same with, a virus, a parasitic virus like HIV. How does it work? It gets in and mimics the immune, aspects of the immune system and cells, etc. It doesn't go to war with the immune system. I mean, that happens later when there's enough parasitism and it breaks down enough of the body, right? But we've got a much bigger problem, and the threat vector is much broader than we've ever thought. And we were winning on these other fronts, and we need to realize that we're still losing on the economic front. And that's going to be a much harder fix.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think society has to undergo some changes before that fix is even possible. Like to reindustrialize and all those things that we'd like to do. I think society needs to go through some pain before we're ready for that.
We need to remember that we're a damn civilization, and that the civilization's what matters, not the frickin' banks, not the stock market. Wealth is an artificial god. It's a false god. And we need to stop worshiping that false god. It's not that wealth is bad and we shouldn't, build things and create things. No, but we're worshiping wealth as if it was a god, and we're all pursuing wealth as if it's the thing that matters. No, life matters. Humanity matters. The civilization that we've built and carved out of every struggle and fight, etc., for 1,000+ years matters. Right? And we need to remember that, and we need to get back to that, or we will lose. As long as we keep putting wealth as the primary, money as the primary, and not the civilization, we will be wiped out. It's what the Chinese have done to save themselves, is to restore the civilization as primary, wealth as secondary. It's what the Russians have been able to do to restore their civilization as primary and wealth creation as secondary. Subordinate is even a better term. And here in the United States, we used to do that until roughly around World War I, the period right around World War I. Right? We used to be as primary, the civilization as secondary wealth creation. Right? It was subordinate. And we've got to get back to that. And all across the English-speaking world, or we are going to be wiped out in this passive-aggressive, subtle way where economically we're just, and in all the bureaucratic administrative positions, we're just replaced. And the enemy wins without firing a shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And we'll just let it happen. Why? Because we don't have any, passionate fight for a job or for a bureaucratic position. It's like, well, somebody wants that, whatever. Right? The only thing that gives you that vitriol to fight in all these ways is your civilization, is that shared common civilization.
Yeah.
And for us, it is the English civilization. So, and that's more than just us white people, right? So some of these Indian folks and some of the Pakistanis and Jamaicans and others are English peoples.
Right.
Right. Because they respect and they adhere to the culture and the civilization, which is a whole bunch of cultures, right?
Right.
But they adhere to the civilization as primary.
Maybe next show we could dig into cultural adherence and how these parasites don't fit into that, like how the parasites do not adhere to the culture. And this is why I was I kind of fumbled it, but I was asking for that final question.
Mm.
A good way to identify a problem is what you just brought it out, like who's not adhering to the civilization, and defining what that is might be a good exercise for next time.
Well, and it's why they go so hard after fragmenting everybody and getting all the different cultures fighting all the different cultures, everybody fighting everybody. The only thing that is, and I've written about this, I wrote the book, This Our English Civilization. People can get it on my website or on Amazon. They can get a signed copy from my website. Give me a second. The only counter to this parasitism, this financialist parasitism, is a strong civilization.
Yeah.
It's the only counter. So we can get all kinds of other things right and we'll lose. We'll still lose if we don't go back and adhere to and put primary our civilization, put all the economic stuff as subordinate.
Beautiful. V, do you have anything else?
No, that was very well said. EM, thank you again for being on, folks. You can find EM's work. The links are all in the description box. Keep it locked and loaded right here. Rogue News ESW. With that being said, Cowboy, take it away.